Hi, everyone. Good to get to talk to you today. So my name is Philip Calpo. I'm an assistant teaching professor here in the Computational Biology Department at Carnegie Mellon University.
My name is Josh Kangas. I am assistant director for the Master's in Automated Science program here.
Yes, and so Josh is assistant director for our Automated Science program. I work in the same capacity for our M.S. in Computational Biology. I thought I'd kind of give a brief overview of the format for today. We just want to have kind of a laid-back, relaxed presentation for 30 minutes or so. We've got some slides. As part of that, many of you have asked some really good questions. We tried to integrate questions where possible. We'll have some of the questions that you've asked at the end. And then if there's something that we haven't quite covered, feel free to use the chat function that we have here on Zoom. And we'd be happy to take anything else if we have time. So I thought we would just kind of give a brief overview of our two programs in terms of from a curricular perspective. And so the big question that a lot of folks will want to know always when we speak to students is, what is computational biology on kind of a high level? And one of the most classic problems that's very widespread in computational biology is something like genome assembly. So we have a sample, a biological sample that has many copies of a genome. So you have lots of cells, and they all presumably have the same DNA or extremely similar DNA. You can apply some technique to shatter that DNA up into pieces. And then there are many lab techniques for sequencing the reads or figuring out what short pieces of DNA are. And then we're left with, because we had original copies of the original genome, trying to assemble that genome using overlapping reads that we have. And that's a problem that's had literally billions of dollars invested into solving it, because it gives us a blueprint for an organism. So for the first human genome, we spent $3 billion of public funding to complete that about 20 years ago. And at that point, we start to see the value of studying biology computationally, but also investing an enormous amount of funding in it because of the questions that we can answer computationally. I can bring you up to speed on, say, a cutting-edge problem in computational biology, which is if I cross off the word identical, and we have multiple copies of a genome that aren't necessarily identical. Say they're a microbial sample from a source in the human body, so over half of our cells are, by some estimates, are bacterial. Or we do an experiment like we've done with our undergraduate students here, as well as students in our high school program, where we go out to Pittsburgh's Three Rivers and we sample river water. And we want to know how the microbial community differs season over season, as well as at different places in the river. How is it that we can analyze that? And so you have the same ultimate kind of biological problem here, where you break DNA up into pieces. You want to read the pieces and then figure out where they came from. But you're not overlapping one thing, you're trying to figure out kind of what an entire community that may have hundreds or thousands of different species in it. And another kind of interesting area of research now, we're seeing kind of gene editing take off. And so we've got CRISPR is really maturing, which is this ability that we're going to have to kind of the hot headlines or designer babies. You may even have a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson movie about gene editing, but there are a lot of really practical reasons for why we would want to edit genes. So to grow crops that can produce fruit that are more delicious, but also more nutritious than anything that we've had before and that scale well. We could, for example, imagine a technology that's going to edit a pig heart to make it into something that the human body doesn't realize is an immune system threat, and save potentially thousands of lives in the US alone every year. There's lots of directions to this. We move beyond the level of DNA analysis as well. So now we're able to read and determine the levels at which genes are turned on and off in a single cell at the RNA level, which is something that 10 years ago was something that essentially was a dream. And for example, CMU has gotten a big part of a $50 million grant from the NIH to build the software tools that are going to be needed to understand the kind of a human cell atlas and figure out what are the, how do we differentiate cells based off of how they're turning different genes up and down? How is it that that's implicated in disease? The image on the left is from Chan Zuckerberg Biohub, where they've done this for mice, and they're able to differentiate of what is it that a healthy mouse bladder cell looks like in terms of its gene levels. Well, how is it that that differs from a T cell, and so on. And they're able to get this really nice picture, and this is one of the really cool things that we're excited about with respect to computational biology. Another one interesting question is analyzing medical images. So we're almost at 20,000 petabytes of medical data. 90% of that is images, and there's a natural question that says, can we write an algorithm that can beat a doctor? You'll hear a lot of companies say that we're able to do this increasingly, but there's really only a narrow number of circumstances where machine learning approaches have been able to beat a human at analyzing medical images and performing diagnoses, one in skin lesions, the other in diabetic retinopathy. And so from that perspective, it's exciting that we could start having kind of cheaper healthcare outcomes or diagnoses that we can leverage algorithms. So there was a hot take from a couple of years ago that was published where one author has proposed that we should start viewing all of biology as an inherently computational discipline, something that's driven by data, increasingly in the 21st century, and something that even with experimentation that we're going to be generating lots and lots of these large-scale data sets that we could only ever dream of analyzing with a computer. And that's kind of the overarching vision of our department, but it's also kind of how our MS in computational biology is envisioned, in that we look at classical approaches in computational biology, but also things that are on kind of more the frontier of what we view as computational biology as well. And so Josh will say a little bit about automated science, because that's something that's even more novel in terms of what our education is here at CMU.
Okay, so before I really get into the details for automated science, I thought I would go through a little bit of background on biological research. So back in the days of, say, Darwin, the emphasis in biological research was primarily descriptive. So we were out there measuring the length of the toes of turtles or counting leaves on trees, right? And then, wrong way, sorry. Then we progressed to a more mechanistic understanding of these biological systems. And so the idea there was we were trying to generate rules, basically, by which biological systems operated. So the central dogma was one of the most important rules that were generated, so DNA to RNA to protein, right? But unfortunately, we determined that there are exceptions to that. So with reverse transcriptase, we can actually convert from RNA to DNA. And so as work went on, we found basically that exceptions were really the rule, rather than there being a specific set of rules. And so this led us to the field of systems biology, where rather than looking for rules, we're actually just trying to understand complex systems and make predictions about how those systems behave under certain conditions. And so these systems are incredibly complex. So the modern approach right now to solving these systems biology problems would be to generate a large data set, and then based on that, use machine learning or other sophisticated tools to learn a predictive model, and then you validate that model, right? And so the validation is usually done by making some predictions using that model and then testing those high confidence predictions experimentally. Unfortunately, we can't actually validate or prove an empirical model. Right, so we are taking a very different approach. So rather than generating data to try to prove a model, we want to generate data to improve a model. And so we do this in the context of active machine learning. And so this is a cycle that we run where it starts out with experiment selection. So you run a set of experiments, and you execute those experiments, and then you build a predictive model from the data you generate. And then based on that model, then you select another set of experiments. And so this approach can be applied flexibly to very complex systems, and the result is that you need fewer experiments to generate accurate models for complex systems. Like diabetes and cancer, for example, are very heterogeneous diseases that need these complex approaches. When you're looking at individual patients, there's a lot of heterogeneity in populations, and so with personalized medicine, having an efficient way of generating experimental data is very useful. So in the Masters in Automated Science program, we are explicitly teaching our students about this. So starting from experiment execution, we're teaching the students about actual lab automation. So this is one of our robots in the video to the right here. Then we teach them about predictive modeling, where they're using machine learning for computational biology tests. And then we teach them about experiment selection, which is where we're using active learning / AI to actually decide what experiments to run next. And so our students are learning about how to generate closed loop experimental systems.
And the thing to note there, right, also is that a lot of these are being done at a scale that a human probably wouldn't have time, energy, or the ability to do.
Right.
Because we're leveraging an entire lab that's based off of robotics. Mm-hmm. We're able to do experiments that probably wouldn't be feasible otherwise.
Exactly. Right. So after touching on that, I want to talk about why you should come and join us in one of our programs. So the first thing, which is big news for us, is that we recently received funding for fellowships. So fellowships for master's programs are very rare. And so we have funding which is allocated for competitive scholarships for socioeconomically underprivileged students. But basically, in short, we want to prioritize diversity between our two programs, and we're looking for really an all-star cast of students from all across the world and the US. As far as the department goes, our department is excellent. So our faculty lead excellent research programs, and when you do some research into our specific rankings based on publications and based on the size of our faculty, CMU is #1. And so if you come here, you would have the opportunity to learn from and work with our exceptional faculty.
So that's kind of, yeah, in terms of the research side, we have an unbelievably strong group. But we also do a lot of things where we connect students to industry often, opportunities, and that can be defined broadly. So it may be research firms, or it may be places like Broad Institute, or things that aren't, that are research institutions, but that aren't necessarily completely within academia. So this is a photo of our students hearing from some folks who came from Regeneron earlier this year. I put up the logos of the places where we've had representatives in the last 12 to 18 months come in and speak to our students, typically in on-campus events, and we've had four of these thus far this fall. And we love getting to do that because it shows students what people are doing out in industry. Often they're very interested. And we also combine kind of student resumes. We send resume books out to potential employers. Sometimes this is set up internships for our students quite quickly, just to kind of facilitate those connections and get students kind of interfacing with folks in industry. I think one of the things that I've said in the past is that if anyone can find an academic department that kind of does as much for our students in terms of getting them connected to industry, that's not, say, a business department or something like that, but a more traditional academic department that does this amount of work, please let us know, because we'd like to do more. We love connecting our students to alums too. So here's one of our alums in our computational biology department who works on gene editing applied to improving crops, speaking to our students about a month ago. We actually, as a result of some of this work, built an entire careers website here in the department. So you can check that out at careers.cbd.cmu.edu. It's an organization search. We realize that we have to refresh it all the time because there are so many startups, for example, AI for healthcare startups. And you'll see a Medium post, and there's dozens of these places that have been founded in the last year, for example. But if you're interested in, say, genomics in the Bay Area, or you want to do pharmaceuticals in New York, you can search for large and small firms across the spectrum of computational biology that do that type of thing, as well as see what opportunities are out there in different sub-areas of computational biology, and learn about academic programs too. I always say don't take my word for it, though. If you ask somebody who's a traditional laboratory biologist, Francis Collins, who's the current director of the NIH, or you ask Bill Gates, Microsoft co-founder, what would you do if you were just starting out in college? They both mentioned kind of computational approaches to biosciences as where they would have started, or one of the areas where they would have started. So that's always exciting to see too. The other reason why we'd love to have students come is that we just know that many of our students, our students come from various backgrounds. We get math majors, we get computer science majors. The biggest piece of the pie for us is life science students who are very, very capable students, but often we see lower salaries for students who have an undergraduate degree in life sciences. So even at a selective university like Carnegie Mellon, this is a phenomenon that we see at the undergraduate level, where a median salary may be $35,000 to $40,000. And when we compare that against first destination outcomes for students in our master's in computational biology program, we see a median salary of $100,000 or more. In the past, we've sent more students on to continue education in PhD programs, so I thought I would show 2017 as well. The previous slide was 2018, where the median salary was a little higher, and we actually had a few more students go to continuing education. So there's a little bit of noise in this year to year, depending on the particular places where students decide to work, but it's a big selling point for us because we know that tuition is always a concern, especially after doing an undergraduate degree. And it's nice to see our students have salary outcomes that are so positive compared to what they might have been coming straight out of undergrad. Josh, you would probably say something about automated science because we don't have data on that because we don't have graduates yet. This is the first year of our program with about a dozen students in the first year.
Right. So it's first year, like Philip said, we don't have any data, but we can look at comparable positions and, or at least attempt to, but the reality is that this field is very new and there's no one in the field right now who is working exactly the kind of jobs that we're training people to do. So we don't have good estimates. That being said, in making industry connections and setting up this program, I went out and talked to many people in the lab automation industry. And I had many, many people who said to me, wow, this is a really cool program. I wish I had it when I was in leaving their undergrad. So there will be ample opportunities for the automated science students when they come out of the program. And we expect that to.
As well as I would say, right, companies that are small and large that are in the process of building these types of labs to solve problems that might be difficult to do with human experimentation, but don't have the skill set of employees that they would need to do it. So it's as opposed to what can often happen in academia where we have a demand and then we need to wait a period of years to see whether or not we're going to propose an academic degree. We're trying to meet that demand quickly here, and that program is unique in the world, although there are others coming. So we thought we'd kind of, that's why you should come. That's why we'd love to have you here. We'll say a little more about student life, but for now I wanted to give an overview of the curricula. So we got the big picture of what we're doing with the two master's programs, but how it is that, on a coursework level, what it is that they share, and what courses that students will take independently. And the big picture thing is that students will come in both programs, and we want them to commingle. We want them to take a lot of the same foundational coursework, and then their degrees will tend to differentiate over time. So all students will come in their first semester and they'll take a programming for scientists course. They'll take an applied cell and molecular biology course. They'll take a foundational course in mathematics and statistics. And this is to provide foundational work in all the disciplines that come together to form computational biology. MS and computational biology students will take an algorithms and data structures course as well. And then the automated science students will take a course that's introducing them to the automated laboratory and getting them to see how to kind of get on the ground running with some of these lab methods. The other course that's common to students in both programs is that we want to train our students as professionals too. So professional development is very critical to both of our master's programs. And so we help our students with how to give a presentation, how to do a mock interview, how to present themselves the strongest to someone in a networking event or in a resume, that type of thing. That actually continues on with the part 2 and for the automated science degree, as well as part 2 of that laboratory course. Both programs in their second semester, students will take a machine learning course as well as a course on automation of biological research typically. MS and computational biology students will take an additional foundational course in quantitative genetics, as well as often take a course in computational genomics. when students enter their third semester, so in a second year fall, both programs will have an elective course to take in computational biology, as well as a course on biological modeling and simulation. MS and automated science students will pick up a fundamentals of bioinformatics course, as well as start the capstone project. Josh, you want to say a little more about the capstone?
The capstone project is basically an opportunity for our students to apply what they've learned in the previous year to an actual biological problem. And so that could take the form of implementing an automated process for an industry partner, or perhaps working with a research lab here at Carnegie Mellon to implement a process for their research efforts in a fully automated way.
Excellent. And so what the MS and computational biology students would be doing in their second year is taking more biology or computational biology elective coursework. So the automated science program has a more fixed curriculum in terms of most courses are defined in advance, although the capstone will obviously have a lot of flexibility. And by the fourth semester, the programs are kind of independent in that regard, where MS and Comp Bio students are taking exclusively depth electives at that point. And then MS and automated science students have an elective, but are also completing their capstone and taking a couple of additional kind of core courses. So that's kind of the big picture on the curriculum. What we're looking for in terms of students would be probably MSCB would be a better fit for students who are looking for more of a traditional computational biology program and more elective coursework, for example, and automated science would be better for students who kind of want to keep their foot in the door of a lab, as well as get the skills that are needed for these types of automated lab jobs. Is that fair to say?
That's definitely fair.
So, that's as high a level view as we can give of the curriculum, and Josh will say a little about student life.
Good. All right, so Pittsburgh has a reputation for being a dirty city. The reality is that's not the case anymore. Many of the steel mills have closed, and it's, as you can see in this picture, this is the confluence of the three rivers. It's a beautiful city, and it's definitely a lot cleaner than.
Neither of us is from here, so we feel comfortable saying that.
All right. We also, Pittsburgh has been called the Paris of Appalachia, and the reason for that is we have many different cultural opportunities, many museums, and that sort of thing that you can get involved with. And it's also the city of champions, right? Unfortunately, this picture isn't necessarily showing our current crop of champions, but we also have the Penguins and the Steelers, and lots of sports teams that you can enjoy. This is an aerial view of our campus, but in terms of the university setting, so this is a very green part of Pittsburgh, so there are parks all around the university. Housing is close to the university, is certainly affordable. A lot of our master's students, if they have roommates, can get away with rent of a few $100s a month and still be close to campus, or at least close to bus access, so they can get to campus quickly. In terms of the actual home of our programs, so we are in the Gates Hillman Center, which is a $100 million building.
$100 million building, yeah.
And we're
the business school had to show us up and build a $150 million building, but we, until recently, had the claim to fame as the most expensive building on campus.
This is definitely one of the better looking buildings. And we're on the 7th floor, and we're showing it here in this red box. And you have a nice view of a lot of Oakland from that location. And
yeah, and as you can see too, we always have excellent weather in Pittsburgh. We also have a lot of fun with our students. So we have ice cream socials with students. We have Thanksgiving events with them. We take them to the local amusement park for their Halloween nights. We try to do this in all seasons too, so we make the best of it being a little chilly sometimes in the winter here in Pittsburgh, and we'll go snow tubing with students, that kind of thing. And we have a dedicated office space for our students also, because we try to be as student-centric as possible. I didn't manage to get a corner office in our lovely $100 million building, but our MS students currently occupy one with this nice view of the Oakland skyline, so I'm a little jealous of them. but they're really happy in that space too. We thought we'd give an overview of the application process, like, what are we looking for? What should be a little about you if you think that this would be a good fit for you? We want students who are first and foremost superlative quantitatively and scientifically. We want you to have a huge interest in the future of biology, because we're going to put you through the ringer and a lot of biology and computational biology coursework for a couple of years, and with the intent that we want you to be the future leaders of the field, and make, potentially a ton of money and endow us some professorships here later, right, Josh?
Absolutely.
And then, but no, in all seriousness, we're looking for students who are very passionate. That's a very important prerequisite for us about biology and about its future. We're also looking for students who have strong language scores, so we welcome international applicants, of course, and for students who are non-native speakers, we have a minimum 100 TOEFL score typically that we look at as a baseline. Added pluses, one thing that you won't see here is that we expect you to have had 4 years of programming. We don't expect you to have had previous exposure to computational biology and have published 4 papers or 3 papers in automated science. These are added benefits, of course, but we have students every year who come in and have never programmed before, and they wind up being quite successful. We have students who come from a stronger quantitative or computer science background who really need foundational coursework in applied cell and molecular biology, and that's a critical part of both of our master's programs for that reason. If you're interested in applying to join us, Josh is going to give a couple details about the application process itself.
So you can see the URL up here, but basically it's one application for both programs. The application is already open. You can apply whenever you want. There is an application fee, but if you apply by December 2nd, there's a reduced fee. Then the final deadline is the 12th of December. But if there's any financial need, you're welcome to apply for fee waivers, and we have those available. And then once our students have been admitted, we have an open house that you can come in March and visit us to get to know the students already in the program and get to know the area. And we'd
sit in on some classes.
Yeah.
We have a couple food events, that kind of thing. It's a friendly time, yeah. And we've seen that a lot of our students will wind up coming who attend that. It's a great way of getting them connected into what we're trying to do. That's we said 30 minutes. We kind of hit our target there for kind of a brief overview of why we enjoy being here, why we enjoy working with the master's programs, what from a big picture perspective, what the direction that we're trying to head with them. And we thought we'd take some questions. So I've got 10 questions or so, and we can go through these. The first question I wanted to focus on, and some of them are in no particular order, but would be that our MS in computational biology, this is a critical thing I should have mentioned, is a joint program with our biological sciences department and has been for many years. And it's a very nice collaborative environment between the two departments. And one of the questions that someone had asked is this as a joint program, how is it that we handle the joint advising of students? And it goes really, really well. So I'm not, even though I'm an assistant director of the program, I focus more on advising students with respect to professional development, with respect to internships, careers, as well as just being here if I'm needed. We have an excellent, another assistant director from biological sciences who will focus on more academic affairs with students. For automated science, Josh kind of wears both of those caps. Yep. In that regard. The second question, and I'll let Josh handle this, is students were curious about tuition and fees.
So the final tuition numbers for next year haven't been established, but it's roughly $50,000 per year when you count tuition and fees associated with that.
And so obviously an investment to make, right, is kind of how we view it. Right?
It's definitely an investment, and we view it as a good investment, particularly in light of career prospects when our students leave.
Yes. The other thing is that sometimes students will come here, and I had questions about PhDs. Sometimes students will come to CMU. Often they may have been admitted to a PhD program elsewhere, but they want the additional education here, maybe the opportunity to do research with a professor here, to maybe stay here and do a PhD or do a PhD elsewhere after they've finished. We increasingly have something I mentioned before, students who go to industry versus a PhD because there are so many opportunities available now. There's so many companies that are coming online. There are more, even with companies that have been established. Maybe 10 years ago or so, they would have only employed PhD holders because they were trying to get started. But nowadays, they're looking at employing master's and undergraduate students as well. So because of those opportunities, there's pressure there, and a lot of our students will take them. And we don't blame them, but we have a few students every year who apply to do PhDs and go on, and they've had good placement in those as well. University of Chicago, they've stayed at Carnegie Mellon, they've gone to Dartmouth or Harvard or so on. So one more question for Josh. I'm interested in both programs. Can I apply to both? How would I pick between the two?
So you can, in the application process, you can rank the programs you would like to join. And our suggestion to you would be determine which program is the best fit for you and definitely put that as your number one choice in the ranking process. Another question that we received is how many students do the two programs have? So the MS in Computational Biology program takes 30 to 35 students per year, and the MS in Automated Science program takes about 15 per year.
And that could change in the future, but for now, we're happy with that. One more question that we'll often get from students is, because students are typically coming to computational biology from math or from another biology or another scientific discipline or computer science, they'll come in with a lot of background exposure in certain areas, and yet we have these foundational courses. So students will always want to know, if I come in and I've got a CS degree, are you going to make me take a programming course? If I've got a biology degree, do I have to take an applied cell and molecular biology course? And the answer to those is not necessarily. We hold placement exams that are very reasonable that our students seem to appreciate having as part of their orientation that are not required. Students can opt into these. We have them in mathematics and statistics, as well as biology, as well as programming. And MSCB, MS in Computational Biology, has an additional one in quantitative genetics. So anybody who places out of one of those exams can still actually take the course, which happens somewhat because we try to teach our courses in a fun and cutting edge way that maybe not everybody would have seen necessarily. But if you want to place out, you're more than welcome to, and both programs have policies for how we can allow students to replace foundational coursework with additional elective coursework, or to go ahead and take a course early, for example. But you'll take the elective at the end. Do students conduct research typically in the department?
Yep. So in both programs, students have the opportunity to conduct research, and it's definitely encouraged. During the academic year, students will usually take research for credit as an elective. And then if they want to continue their research over the summer between the 2 years, they often will be paid for that.
And there's nothing explicitly preventing a student from doing paid research during the semester.
Right.
But we try to challenge our students with coursework. And so for that reason, if you come to CMU, you're going to be quite busy, and it will be difficult to do research for pay at the number of hours that you might want to do for that.
Yep.
Yes, which is a good thing.
Yep, and the Masters in Comp Bio students can do a thesis project, which is totally a research effort. And then for automated science, the students do a capstone project, and the capstone is basically focused on implementing an automated process to help someone's research efforts. So there are plenty of research opportunities.
The other thing along those same lines is TA positions. So students will want to supplement their pay or their time here with paid TA positions, and these are available. We have students across all programs who often will want to TA, so we can't guarantee TA experiences for all students. But for example, I have 2 excellent TAs in my programming course from MS in Computational Biology currently, and we've been happy with them in the past. And so it's not something that's guaranteed, but it's certainly something that's possible, especially in your second year after you've taken a course and excelled in it. If you have a passion about kind of passing that information on to the next crop of students, we'd love to have you. Josh, what about internships? What kind of internships do students obtain?
So we make tons of efforts to give our students internship opportunities. One of those things that we do is, as part of the professional development course, the students generate resumes, and we put together a resume book for the class of students and send that out to lots of industry contacts who are looking for interns over the summer, and that often yields excellent internship opportunities for the students. And as far as career placement after the students do internships, so typically we have basically 100% of our students have been placed within a couple months of graduation in excellent careers.
In MS and Comp, yeah, it's really good. And over the summer too, many students will stay here and do paid research with a professor. That's often a way for a student who is not sure whether or not they want to do a PhD yet, even after a year of study here. Maybe an opportunity for them to do some paid research, maybe get a publication as a result, decide whether or not that type of thing really interests them ultimately. And we found that companies will respond well to students who do paid research as well, because it's ultimately a project in computational biology on the cutting edge of the discipline, and they tend to appreciate wherever that has happened, if it's at a company or if it's here at CMU, or even at another university. And then, so the final question I think we had was whether programs are available through distance or online learning. And the answer would be, at the current time, everything that we do is based on our Pittsburgh campus. We'd love to leverage some of the stuff that's happening online in the future. I know I myself have been and continue to be involved in open online educational efforts. But for now, we love kind of the face-to-face interactions. We like being in one part of one building with all of our students, right, and seeing them day in and day out, and it's a really kind of nice environment. So for now, it's something that can only be done in Pittsburgh, but that we're always open to considering.
In the automated science program, one of the key features of our lab courses is that we purchased a large robot that has many different components to it, and so you have to be local to learn how to actually manage that robot and use it effectively. So.
Yes, excellent. So Josh, we're taking a look at the chat. Do we have additional questions from there?
I don't have anything. You might have. I think something might have popped up for me.
I didn't see it here, but yeah, we did have a question. But I think it was a question earlier that we probably managed to do an okay job, I hope, of explaining, which is professional or research. What's the main intention? And I think the main intention of both would really be to try and strike a balance between these and allow students to gravitate towards what they're more interested in. So no one is going to force you, if you're an MS in computational biology student, no one will force you to do research for credit. You can come here and just take courses and do an internship in industry and then go off and work in industry, and we're happy with that. Or you can come in and, from the second semester decide that you want to start doing research and doing a thesis and transition over to doing a PhD. So yeah, we welcome in both programs students who are kind of interested in both trajectories. Yeah. We had a good question too about GRE scores, Josh.
So
what are the thresholds that we look at?
I don't actually know the thresholds for MSCB.
Well, same.
In automated science, we don't actually look at GRE scores now, but we look for your coursework and your GPA and make sure that you have an exceptional quantitative background.
Yes, like that quantitative background can be expressed in multiple ways. One is through a GRE exam, but another is through excelling in coursework. Yep. Yes. Okay. Excellent. So I think we were reasonably diligent about this and tried to keep it compact. So I think it's if that's it. I think we've covered everything. We'll sign off. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you have offline. Our emails are relatively easy to find, so you can look us up online, and we'd be happy to kind of chat by email in the future.
Good.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.